Welcome to Alpha Wolf Trading. Did you know that there's over 12,000 stocks or companies that trade on the OTC? Between the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange, you have over 7,000 companies. But us as retail investors, we wouldn't know that unless we were researching. Because why? Wall Street focuses on the elite, the big companies. And where the retail investor has their advantage is in small and micro-cap stocks. Why? Because you have the opportunity to speak directly with leadership. That is what this is all about here at Alpha Wolf Trading. We're trying to find the hidden gems, and we interview the executive teams of companies that we think meet the parameters to be those hidden gems. I also want to make sure you understand that this is not a paid-for promotion. I collect no compensation for the interviews I do here. These companies that I interview have been identified as potential opportunities for me and the members of Alpha Wolf Trading to receive a higher than average return on our investment. These companies I have identified either because of a technical setup on a chart, a fundamental change within the organization, new management team, new products, all kinds of different things that actually lead me here. But what do I think is the most important? Leadership. And that is why I do these interviews. I want to understand what drives the person that is leading the charge. I want to feel their passion. I want to understand their vision and the strategy that they're going to use to achieve success. That is what these interviews are for. I want to understand the share structure and the cap table, the size of the TAM, the total addressable market. This is the opportunity to learn all of those things. So sit back and enjoy. And if you learn anything from today's interview, do us a favor. Subscribe to the Alpha Wolf Trading YouTube channel. Hey everybody, Tim from Alpha Wolf Trading coming at you with a follow-up interview with one of my all-time favorites, Desmond Wheatley at BEEM Global, who just reported earnings, a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, and blew out the numbers, right? Knew they were going to be strong. Stock didn't react, but that's okay. The market is still in turmoil, doesn't know what to do because of the Fed and all this other stuff. But Desmond, how are things going over there at BEEM Global?
I think you just said it. We're growing like crazy, and it was third quarter was the last time we filed. We're coming out with our K on sometime around March 23rd. But so I obviously can't talk about that. But I can certainly talk about everything up to the third quarter of 2022, and nothing but growth. I mean, we did 6 million in revenue in 2020, 9 million in 2021, and by the third quarter of 2022, we'd done 14.1. You can line that out however you like towards the end of the year. You probably won't be far off wrong. But the other thing that was meaningful at that time was again 6, 9, 14.1 in just in 3 quarters, not full year. And at the same time, we announced over $60 million in contracted revenue. Contracted backlog, which we will convert into revenue. I'm not giving guidance, but as you know, I have been investing in a facility which has a great deal of room for expansion for some time. That wasn't an accident. I've been anticipating this. And, we're selling our products to the U.S. Army, to the Marine Corps, to Veterans Administration, and to a whole bunch of corporate customers as well.
New York
City. New York City gave us another purchase order, the biggest one in our history with them. By the way, remind me to tell you the story about what happened when they had the press conference there in New York City about that, because it was kind of good. I wasn't there, but it's a good story about our product. So look, yeah, I mean, nothing but growth right now. Still very disciplined where cash and equity is concerned. Nothing's changed there. I mean, I love what I'm doing, Tim, and I was a little early to this party. I've said that before. I started doing this over 10 years ago. Making solar-powered electric vehicle charging stations in 2010 wasn't probably, the most timely thing I could have done. Guilty. But at the same time, that gave us a head start on everybody else. And the fact is, no one has a product that can compete with ours right now at a time when the world is electrifying. And we just have the fastest deployed, most scalable, most robust, lowest total cost of ownership solution available. That's why people are buying from us.
What I love about you, Desmond, is you are extremely passionate about this whole industry. You have been since day one. And I like hearing your view on how you think we're going to progress to an all electric. And one of the things that you highlight is the consumer drives real change.
Yeah.
Right. And that once they drive an electric vehicle, you can't see how they would want to go back to a gas combustion engine vehicle. Right.
Yep.
Parts, labor, all of that stuff, very simplistic machines compared to a combustion engine machine. Right.
Yep. Yep.
So, for a while there, it wasn't until you and I talked that last time where I was thinking about the fact that China has, 90 or controls 90% of the global supply of the materials for batteries and all of that stuff. But your reasoning as to why it wasn't going to be as bad as I foresee it was really interesting, and one I hadn't heard before. Right? You're pretty passionate about this industry, and you know your numbers. So do the math for me on how many charging stations we're going to need to be a all electric vehicle society by whatever 2035, 2040, whatever. How many stations do we need?
It's very simple. You need about one publicly available plug for every 5 electric vehicles on the road. Now, listen, if you get 10 experts in this industry in a room and ask them that question, you're going to get 10 different answers. All right. And maybe I'm just another asshole with an opinion about this, except let me tell you, my opinion is informed. I have been doing this now for about 13 years. I'm a gray hair in this industry. I have been driving electric vehicles and motorcycles and pickup truck and everything else like that for over a decade now. And I've been deploying the infrastructure to support them. And I have been using the infrastructure. I've been fueling my vehicles, my electric vehicles, for over a decade now. I might not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but even me, after a decade of doing something, I'll start to get the hang of it, right? And the simple fact of the matter is 5 to 1. Frankly, if everything works well, then we can get away with one charger for every 5 vehicles on the road. If everything works well, things have a tendency of not working well because people don't behave the way spreadsheets want them to behave. So now there are some people out there that will tell you that you could get away with 12 to 1, and I can tell you that those are people who are only good at spreadsheets. You put it on a spreadsheet, it'll work. That's not the way consumers or anybody behaves, for that matter. There are other people, particularly fleet managers, that will tell you it's going to need to be more like 1 to 1. I think that's excessive. But I think 5 to 1 probably makes sense. And it's easy to figure out why, by the way. I mean, you don't need to be an expert. Just think about owning an electric vehicle. Think about taking it somewhere, plugging it in, the dwell time on the plug, and then that vehicle comes off and another vehicle has to come on it. This is not going to be a 3 to 5 minute exchange like a gas station, and it shouldn't be. EVs are much better than that. As I've said during the last call, you're going to fuel these vehicles while you're doing something else, typically fairly slowly. That's much better for the vehicle, much less expensive for the industry and for the consumer. Consumers will always go for what's most convenient and least expensive. Again, you don't need to be a genius to figure that out either. So it's going to be a relatively slow recharge, but it's fine because you're doing it while you're doing something else. And to cycle 5 or so vehicles across a charger like that during a 24-hour period if you think about occupancy rates, underutilization, everything else, that's probably a pretty realistic number. Now, there are about 300 million vehicles in the United States, give or take the odd one on somebody's lawn on bricks. They're all moving around, and so they're all going to need to plug in. 300 million divided by 5 equals 60, I think. And that means you're going to need something like 60 million publicly available chargers. And they say, all right, well, when are we going to need them? 60 million doesn't matter if we don't need them for another, 200 or 300 years. That's still a kind of a leisurely pace. Well, that's not how it's going to be. You're going to see Europe banning the sale of anything well, they've already essentially banned the sale of anything but emissions-free vehicles by 2035. Realistically, that means electric. There will not be a place for hydrogen in these types of fleets. The other biofuels and all that sort of stuff will not play a significant role either. So Europe will go all electric by 2035 or shortly thereafter. Europe is the largest automotive market in the world. The North American car manufacturers cannot continue to make diesel and gasoline cars for North America and electric vehicles for Europe, not profitably. 40 or 50 years ago, maybe, not today. And so that means that North America will go electric as well. And this is why you see Mary Barra of General Motors and Ford and Stellantis and frankly all the major autos committing to all electric portfolios. General Motors made it quite clear by 2035 they're going to have an all electric portfolio. That's not an accident. Those dates don't line up by accident. They line up because General Motors knows that by that time they're going to have to be all electric. And that's a great thing because to your earlier point, if there is an irresistible object anywhere in the universe, it's the mighty US consumer. Nothing stands in the way of the mighty US consumer, and electric vehicles are just so far superior than their internal combustion engine counterparts and they're wonderful gadgets, and consumers love gadgets. There's just no way that I can conceive of consumers continuing to go to dealerships and buying slower, maintenance requiring, more expensive to operate vehicles when they could own something like the Rivian that I drive, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds in a pickup truck. It's not going to happen. And that's great news, frankly, for everybody.
So, last time we talked, we primarily talked about the EV ARCs, but I've known for a long time that you have had a patent out there for lampposts.
Yes.
As charging stations, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And I don't know where you're at with that actually, but I think about it all the time because I think about places like San Francisco and New York, yep, where you don't have a garage, you park on the street, right? And where are all these people going to charge their vehicles if they're parking on the street?
That's a really interesting thing that you bring up there because I think it was Disraeli that said there are lies, damn lies, and statistics, and there are several statistics in our industry which really qualify as ranking above damn lies. And one of them, the worst of all kinds of statistics, is those that are very unhelpful but true. And I give you one that's very unhelpful but true. At the moment, you will hear from the Department of Energy in the United States, a very reputable organization, just telling the truth, that about 8 out of 10 electric vehicle drivers charge their vehicles at home. And that's true, they do, 8 out of 10. But then you have to say to yourself, but who are these 8 out of 10 electric vehicles owners, right? And unfortunately, people like me and you, affluent, single-family residents, large garage, plentiful electrical supply to our houses. This does not describe the general population. What it describes is the early adopter of electric vehicles, Tesla drivers, Rivian drivers, and all that sort of stuff. That number is going to go absolutely on its head in the future. It'll be 80% who can't charge at home because of the kinds of things that you just talked about. People who live in multi-dwelling units, vertical cities, not just the United States, all of Northern Europe, all of vertical Asia. None of these people will be able to charge their vehicles at home. Tim, the average number of vehicles owned by the average US household is 2.3. Even those households who can charge one vehicle have sufficient circuit room in their garage and all the other things like that to charge one vehicle. They will not be able to charge the other 1.3 vehicles that they apparently own. And so any way that you look at it, the great majority of charging will be done in the public domain in the future, just as gas stations are nowadays. I mean, no one has a gas pump in their living room, right? So it's okay. But the thing is, the EV fueling infrastructure will be vastly superior to the gas station experience because instead of having to go somewhere special and horrible, which let's face it, that's what gas stations are, apologizing to anybody who's listening that operates a gas station, but let's face it, none of us would selectively go to a gas station were it not for gasoline. It's not sort of, let's take the kids over to the gas station and hang out. No, It's only gasoline that draws you there. EV charging will be quite different because you will do that where you were already going. So now it's, hey, honey, let's go to the park with the kids. Oh, and we'll plug the vehicle in while we're there and fuel it while the kids are playing on the trampoline or whatever. Let's go to work. Let's go to school. Let's go to the supermarket. We're going to fuel in all of these environments where we were already going. And so that's really a much superior way of behaving. I'm already doing it. And I can tell you, it's magnificent. So we're going to need an awful lot of them. Now, the problem is, or the opportunity, probably I should better describe it as for BEEM Global, is that during the last decade, the entire electric vehicle charging industry has deployed something under 150,000 electric vehicle charging stations across the United States of America. So let that sink in for a second. 10 years to do 150,000. And now we need to do 60 odd million in the next couple of decades, right? A couple of million a year. So 150,000 over 10 years to a couple of million a year to get to where we're going to hit our goals. Clearly, that sort of siege mentality of digging trenches, pouring concrete, pulling wires, and doing all the other stuff like that, that's not going to get us there. That will not win the war.
Just out of curiosity, Desmond, what does it cost on average? Do you know what it costs to run a power line out to a charging station, trenches and all that? What is that?
Here's another one that's going to go in the lies and statistics bucket, because actually this is another thing, just for those people who are listening to this who are looking for an investment thesis in EV charging. One thing I would like to say to you is that looking at the historical cost per plug installed may not be a very helpful data point for you, and here's why. Picture your favorite parking lot that you go to, either at your office or at a supermarket or anywhere that you go. Somewhere on that piece of property, there may well be a parking space which is close to an existing electrical circuit. The circuit might be right behind a wall and the parking space might be right next to it, for example. Now, in that instance, you can deploy a grid-tied electric vehicle charger very inexpensively, because there's a minor construction job. Pour a bit of concrete for a pedestal for the charger, drill a hole in the wall, run the wires through the wall. It's minor permitting, minor construction permit, minor construction and electrical project. And that's going to be pretty expensive. And you can see lots of these numbers published. Sub $10,000, $10,000, something in that range. Now, of course, you then got a lifetime of electric bills. Where are they going to go? Only up, right? But let's not even talk about it. Let's just talk about the cost for installation right now. This is a very unhelpful statistic, because here's what happens. After 2 or 3 electric vehicles are queued up to charge on that one charger that you've put in that's only placed on your property where it's cheap to do it, there's a new thing that comes in. This is one of my favorite of the industry terms that's up right now. This is called charge rage. Charge rage. Charge rage is when the tree-hugging hippies start beating the hell out of each other because one of them got to the charger before they did, and it sort of throws the whole image that you have of electric vehicle drivers, peace, love, and flowers and all that sort of stuff out the window. And of course, I'm being somewhat tongue-in-cheek here, but you get the point. After a while, that one EV charger that you deployed inexpensively is now being used all the time. So you want to deploy some more. So what do? You call your contractor and you say, hey, listen, remember that EV charger you installed for me for $10,000? I need another 10 of them. It's been a great success. Loads of people showing up in EVs at my business or my employees or whatever. It's been a great success. I need 10 more of them. And your contractor is going to say one or two things to you. They're going to say, okay, that'll be $500,000. Okay, and you're like, huh? Hang on a minute. It was 10 grand to do one. 10 times 10 is 100,000, I think. Why do you want 500,000? So, well, because we used up that easy to access circuit. Now we need to dig a lot of trenches and we need to do some electrical upgrades, and all that other stuff's going to be much more expensive to do it this time. Or, and this is very real, we have customers right now, BEEM customers, who have come to us because precisely what I'm about to describe to you happened. They installed, in fact, one I'm thinking now, put 15 chargers on their property, commercial real estate property. Those were all being used all the time, so they called the contractor back and they said, listen, we need to put some more on there. And the contractor said, can't do it. So why not? Because you don't have enough capacity, electrical capacity. Electricity is not infinite. You need to have a certain amount of capacity, right? That any of you that don't believe me, plug a toaster and a hairdryer into the same outlet and see how you get on. Okay, it's not that, it's the same thing, just scaled up. All right. And so they said, well, you don't have enough capacity. And so the customer said, well, we'll pay you, add capacity. We have to do this. This is not a question of want to, we have to do it. And the contractor said, it's not us you're going to pay. It's not us you need to ask. It's the utility, because the problem's not on your property, it's at the local substation. Okay, so very long-winded answer, I apologize, but useful for you to know that these numbers about how much it costs to install a charger it's how long is a piece of string. And of course, the industry is appropriately and predictably plucking all the short string first. What I can tell you is that where we're deployed, this is the interesting thing about our product, we don't get deployed where the grid is. We get deployed where people want charging. And remember what I said about the mighty consumer? At the end of the day, they always get their way. They'll play the game and plug in next to where the grid is in the early days, but they won't carry on like that. In the end, they're going to want to put it where they want it. Everywhere that we're deployed, and that's hundreds of locations across the United States and in some small way internationally, in every location, give or take one or two maybe, the cost of our product was less than the avoided cost of construction and electrical work. Never mind the utility bill. We were less. And so that comes down to why? Well, because once people learn that they can put our product anywhere, they sort of say, well, hang on, where we really need it? We need it in these tough locations. And sometimes that's just across the street or whatever. And if you say, well, how much would it cost you to put a grid-tied infrastructure in there? Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, not us. Product's always the same every time. $59,400 what the product starts. All construction, all the electrical work, all the utility bill, all the electricity you can ever eat, all wrapped up in that one number. Never gets more expensive, and our costs are going down. In the meantime, the grid-tied construction industry and all that costs are only going to go up.
Let me ask you a question about, so, you live in San Diego, I live in Las Vegas. We don't have a problem with sun. We get plenty of it, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Back east, though, they get cloudy skies. The winters suck. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. It's, never a sunny day there. It's always gray.
Yep.
How does your product perform in those states?
Less well.
Okay.
So this is one of these instances where perfect is the enemy of good. We get asked this a lot. Nameplate, is a nameplate on it? What's it going to do in the following? There's only one thing that matters, Tim. Does our product generate and store enough electricity to replace the electricity you consumed in the vehicle doing its job during whatever period you were using it before you were able to plug in again? That's the only question that matters. How many kilowatts our array is, how many kilowatt hours our batteries store, what the efficiencies of the silicon are and all that. Those are fabulous and fantastic stories. And I've got a whole team of scientists and engineers that if I didn't have them so busy, I'd let you chat with about that. But right now they've got other things to do. What matters is, do we produce enough for what we refer to as DRR, daily range replenishment? The only thing that we care about. Okay, because remember, the gas station experience is gone. You're not going somewhere once your vehicle's empty and hanging around while you fill it up from empty to full. And doing that as infrequently as possible, because we've already established it's a horrible experience. No, instead, you're charging your electric vehicle like you charge your cell phone. You're plugging it in whenever you're doing something else, but opportunistically. And we call this DRR, or daily range replenishment. I'm going to give you three numbers which are important. In the United States, the average sedan drives 30.4 miles per day, according to the Department of Transportation, 30.4, okay? 8 out of 10 commuters require less than 24 miles for the round trip, not the average, 80% of them, the great majority of them. And then fleet vehicles, we certainly do an awful lot of fleet vehicles, better than half of our business right now, recharging fleet vehicles, typically driving anywhere between 20 and 30 miles per day. And by the way, it doesn't matter if they're government or if they're private. It doesn't matter if they're in the United States or in Europe. 20 to 30 miles a day seems to be a very good number. And some of the very large fleets that we deal with, less than 10 miles a day. Okay, so now you have those numbers in here. 30 for the average vehicle, 24 miles for 8 out of 10 commuters, and sort of somewhere between 10 and 30 miles for fleet vehicles. And then I'll tell you that where you are and where I am, an EV ARC is going to generate and store enough electricity to power 265 driving miles in a day. Okay, so 265 driving miles divided by 30 or by 24 or by 10, take your pick. That's how many vehicles we could theoretically recharge every day with daily range replenishment, right? But you didn't ask me about that. You asked me about Cleveland or New York City in the winter or something like that. And what I'm going to tell you is that the performance is greatly reduced in those types of environments. And we might have half it, even less than half it. Let's say in New York in the winter, we don't even get 265. We don't even get half of 265, 130. Let's say we get 100 miles that we can use in New York City. Well, 100 miles is 5 fleet vehicles daily range replenishment in New York City. So does it matter that it didn't produce 265? No, certainly we'd like it to have produced 265 miles, but does it matter? No, because you weren't going to plug more than 5 fleet vehicles into the thing anyway. And so this is where nameplate and all these things just they're not helpful. We're very practical in our approach, right? At the end of the day, people say to me, what does it do? I say, it helps people's cars drive down the road. So that's the only thing we care about. What do we need to do to get their cars to drive down the road? Now, you mentioned Ohio. I'm going to go one better. Pittsburgh is probably, I think, the worst weather environment that we operate in. There's a joke. The joke was originally about Germany, but I'm going to tell you the same joke about Pittsburgh, right? And no, I'll tell you about Germany, and then Pittsburghers will know if it's right or not. The joke is a man gets off the airplane in Germany and it's raining, and he sees a small boy standing there, and he says, "Hey son, how long has it been raining?" And the small boy says, "I don't know. I'm only 5." so it's probably a bit like that in Pittsburgh. Well, what we know in Pittsburgh is that there are sometimes when we'll get 6 or 8 weeks of just black skies, right? Very little solar resource coming through. You should know, by the way, that our products are very well engineered, and they do convert any light into electricity, even in low light conditions, poor cloudy conditions. We're still creating some electricity.
You're not stuck to. I mean, if they came out with a new solar panel tomorrow that for somehow, some way was able to collect more sunlight,
yes,
gray skies,
yes,
you could switch it out because you're not committed to anybody, right?
Agnostic. We use the best. And by the way, there are some very promising technologies out there which we're talking to right now. They're just not bankable yet. They're not commercially feasible yet. However, they will be. That's, what Moore's law in energy, Moore's law in transportation is what's kind of happening right now. It's fantastic. And when that does happen, we'll go from 265 available miles to 400 miles. By the way, there's another force at work here too, which is really important to understand. When I first started driving an electric vehicle all the way back in 2010, I was getting something under about 2.5 miles to the kilowatt hour. So it doesn't really matter what that means. But here's what's important. Now, similar size vehicle, I'm getting closer to 5 miles to the kilowatt hour. In fact, Lucid has just announced better than 5 miles kilowatt hour. Why? Well, because the vehicles are getting more efficient, right? You've got materials technologies improving, just general efficiency improvements. Electric motors getting more efficient. All sorts of things are happening, right? So that, if you think about that, when I was getting 2.5 miles to the kilowatt hour, if I have a vehicle now that gets 5 miles to the kilowatt hour, and I'm using the same EV arc, our EV arcs have advanced tremendously since that time, but if I was, that EV arc would now be producing twice as many miles today as it was producing back in 2010, because miles are the only thing that matters. I don't drive kilowatt hours or electrons or silicon wafers. I drive miles. If I can get twice as many miles out of an EV arc because the vehicle got better, that's still twice as many miles. And that is happening in the industry. So all of these forces are working in our favor. You're absolutely right. If we see some significant breakthroughs in solar modules, we will, of course. And they're bankable and reliable and everything else, because reliability is a huge part of this too. If I could just say a word about that. When I first started making this product back in 2011, I think it was the first one, I really believed 5 years the batteries would probably have to be swapped out, because that's everything I was learning from the battery industry. You get that many cycles, right? Well, I'm going to tell you something right now. Looking out my office window, we're at our factory facility in San Diego. I'm looking at unit 003, the third one we ever made, sitting in my parking lot. It's charging a car right now. 003. Okay, the 13 years later, 12 years later, it is still charging a car with the same batteries in it. No appreciable degradation in their performance during all of that time. The batteries we're making now far better than the ones we were putting in back in 2011. So everything's getting better, but even the old ones that we made are still operating. And so reliability is a very, very big part of this as well. But you can be sure that when these new technologies come forward, as soon as they're reliable and bankable, yes, we'll integrate them into our product. We'll only get better and better. Will a trench ever get better? No, it's just a trench. Trenches are great. Don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking them, but they never get any better. Our product gets better all the time.
Right. So now you kind of, I didn't get an answer on your street lamp post.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I'm really glad you brought me back to that. So EV, we call it EV standard, which is, lamp standard. That's a term to describe a street lamp, and then electric vehicle. So it's an EV standard, electric vehicle recharging lamp standard, basically. There are people out there in the world today who are putting EV chargers on streetlights. I applaud them. It's a great idea. London in particular, they're doing that. They connect to the circuit that comes up to the streetlight. and as I say, I applaud that. It's a great thing. We need everything we can get. Some people think I'm an absolutist and it's not my way or the highway. Not at all. This is like fighting a war. You don't say, hey, my platoon's better than any platoon, so let me fight all the battles. You say, hey, we need everyone here. Jesus Christ, let's just all do the best we can, right? It's like, you don't send a tank to a dogfight, right? You need everything to win the war, and this is sort of a war we're fighting here. So where the people who are doing this, the EV chargers onto the streetlights, I applaud them. But the one limiting factor there is that they're using a circuit which is designed to run a light bulb. That's much less. Remember, we go back to that electricity is not infinite thing, right? Just because there's electricity on a wire doesn't mean you can pull all the electricity you want out of it, right? And so when you build a street light, you say, well, most street lights were built with this idea of having like 1,000-watt sodium bulb in them. Good news, we're replacing some of them with LEDs that require less electricity, but the street light circuit still was designed to run a 1,000-watt sodium bulb. Right, that's okay if you live in London and you're commuting 5 miles a day or something. You plug in all night, you're going to get all of that back and some. That's great. But the problem is it won't solve the real thing. That 60 million chargers that we know we need to fuel all of the United States vehicles, and then by the way, that number goes to 400 million if you want to globalize this. It's a big lump, right? So what we said is we need a street light. And I'll come back to why streetlights so important in a second. But we need a streetlight that can do more than that, right? That can do more than the circuit that's coming to it. And so we said, well, hang on a minute. Let's look at EV ARC. What are we good at doing with EV ARC? We're good at converting renewable sources of energy and storing them and putting them into electric vehicles. So what if we made a streetlight that had a lot of the same DNA that the EV ARC has? Let's say it had some renewable sources, and let's say it had some battery storage, our own proprietary battery storage, and let's say it had our electronics and our other smarts and know-how. And think of an EV ARC that's been run through a sausage machine. Instead of being short and squat like it is, now it's going to be tall and skinny, right? Same technology, just in a different form factor. So what do we have? We have a street light, which at the very top has a light wind generator. So when it's windy, and wind's very unreliable, but in some places, particularly those kind of high-rise environments that you're talking about, if you think about Manhattan, think about Chicago, think about even San Francisco, you get a lot of man-made wind. We can take advantage of that from these man-made canyon effects that we get there, okay? So we take advantage of that. And then we also have a tracking solar array on that thing, using our proprietary and patented tracking, which gives us 25% more electricity than a fixed solar array would. So you've got light wind generator making electricity when there's wind. You've got a tracking solar array making electricity when the sun is shining, or at least when it's getting light, even if it's kind of cloudy. And then we also take the streetlight circuit. During the hours of daylight, we take the entire streetlight circuit. So let's say 1,000 watts, all of that. At nighttime, we replace that 1,000-watt sodium bulb with a 200-watt LED bulb that has more lumens, makes more light than the sodium bulb. We take the delta from that, which is 800 watts. I'm sorry, I'm throwing a lot of numbers quickly at you here. But we combine all of those things together in our batteries. And then we do an EV charge from the batteries. So the batteries are soaking up electricity from the wind generator, from the solar array, and from the streetlight circuit. And we're combining all three sources into batteries, and then we're able to kind of puke that electricity out of the charger at a much faster rate. Think of sort of 3 hose pipes running into a bucket, each one of them kind of slowly. But when you tip the bucket over, that's a lot of water, a lot of that comes out at the same time. And that's what in that analogy, the batteries are the bucket, the 3 hose pipes are the wind, the solar, and the streetlight circuit, all filling up our bucket, our batteries, and then we're tipping that electricity into the car at a faster rate.
And that's proprietary to you, correct?
Patented here and in Europe and in Asia. Okay, so why is a streetlight solution so important? Well, it turns out that not everybody lives in Las Vegas and Southern California, right? We've already established that too. Lots of people live in places where there are not large, flat, open parking environments. Western United States is, not unique in the world for that, but certainly has more of it than anybody else does. Maybe the Australians per capita, but at any rate, most of Northern Europe, vertical Asia, and then lots of US cities just don't have very large flat parking lots. In fact, New York City, who, as you know, is our largest municipal customer, they don't even have enough parking lots to park their own fleet vehicles. The city's fleet vehicles have to park on street, never mind the civilians, okay? And so what we said was we need to have a curbside charging solution, somewhere where you can charge an electric vehicle while you're at the curb, okay? Well, it turns out it's really, really difficult to do that. Think of the sidewalk. Think of your favorite sidewalk. Now imagine you're going to put a device on there that's going to deliver electricity to cars. Where's the electricity coming from? Well, it's probably coming from the building next to you, right? So you're going to have to find out who's the owner of that building. Not the tenant, the owner, but also you need the tenant as well. Now you're going to have to get an easement from them. Then you're going to have to put in an extra meter on their property. You're going to have to get the utility company to bring power. Then you have to trench the street, which means you're going to the city. All right, okay. It takes an hour to tell you this, so I'll stop here. But you can see it's very, very complex. Whereas if we have an EV standard product, we can go to an existing streetlight, take the existing streetlight off its foundation, put the EV standard onto that foundation with some modifications in some instances, because we're going to have more overturning loads. That's okay. It's a very minor thing to do. And then we're going to use existing circuits. So we don't need to dig trenches. We don't need to run wires. We don't need to get easements or make arrangements or an extra meters or anything like that. And then we're going to augment that with renewables and do it all in our batteries. So the final result is curbside charging with almost no civil work, with no electrical work, and a product that runs mostly on renewables, so the utility bill is incredibly low. Oh, and one other fabulous thing, when the power goes out, keeps charging vehicles. Less, yes, but keeps charging vehicles. So if the Chinese or the Russians or the Iranians turn our grid off, or if a hurricane does, or something else like that, we will still be able to fuel our vital vehicles. And that should not be understated, the importance of that.
So where are you with, I mean, the patents have been approved, they're patented.
Yes.
Where, I mean, I know you're focused on EV arcs, right? But where is the street post, like where do you see that becoming a component of revenues for you guys?
Yes. So I have, as I mentioned earlier, at the moment, contracted purchase orders to make more than 6 times more EV arcs than I made in the last full year that I have announced, right? Yeah, I had an analyst, a well-known and respected guy, I like him a lot, on the phone the other day, of one of the 13 analysts that now cover us. And by the way, just for your information, they all have buys or strong buys, except I think there's one hold, right? And even the hold has a price target higher than where we're trading at the moment, I think, okay? But anyway, I had he's a really smart guy, knows the industry really well. And he said, Desmond, can I anticipate 30% year-over-year growth from you? And I said, I hope not. I sincerely hope not. That would be a bitter disappointment, right? So, I mean, think about the world I live in. 30% year-over-year growth is a bitter disappointment to me. I haven't done that. I mean, the last 3 or 4 years, I've done better than that, right? And now we're looking way better than that. So that, with all of that said, I bring that up because you'll see that it's becoming very, very important to me to get incredibly efficient at making EV arc, right? Because of this massive rate of growth that we have with it. And so I want to be as efficient as possible so that I can churn out as many of them as possible without risking quality ever and without risking safety ever. But I want to churn out as many of them as possible. And then I also want to do it in the most cost efficient way, because we need to drive as much profit as we can out of that product. Because of that, I have made the decision to divert my engineering resources to perfecting the process of manufacturing the EV arc and selling it profitably. And that has taken them off developing the EVR. We have it patented. We have the theoretical engineering's all done now. It's form factor, which is not insignificant. However, with all of that said, it is a very big priority for me. I believe we'll sell more EV standards than anything we've ever made, actually, by a long shot. New York City has 300,000 lamp standards. I believe that every 5th one in the future will be an EV charging spot. I'm not saying it's me. I'm not saying we'll win that, but we're going to have a damn good place at that table. There are many other things. So I think we'll sell a lot. So I will push it back into a major area of focus this year. And I am in my intention, and I'm hopeful that we will have an operating unit this year, which we'll take to market.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I remember seeing that thing. How many years ago? I mean, it's
been a couple of years. Please don't remind me.
Yeah, and I thought it was a brilliant idea. I mean, I just thought that makes a lot of sense to me, right?
Thankfully, so did the patent office.
The only thing I was questioning though was that the fact that it's low voltage, right? It's a low voltage. It's a light. I mean, it's not like
we've solved that. We have solved that.
Okay,
yeah, we have solved that.
Let's talk about another thing too, real quickly. You know, and I'm diverting a little bit from the EVR, but I also want people to understand you're not a one-trick pony here.
Exactly.
Okay.
Very important.
I read about drones and delivery all the time.
Yep.
Right. And I think you guys have a drone solution too, don't you?
I've got more than one drone solution, actually. So let's talk about what we're actually already doing right now. We're already making batteries that we're putting into drones, some very well-known drones. Okay, so it turns out the battery company that I bought to supply my own requirements, which has worked out very, very well for us. Thank you. One of the stipulations I had when I acquired that company of the management team and even of the sellers was they can't stop servicing the existing business that they have. So we're putting batteries in drones, in submersibles, in medical devices, in stationary storage, in micro-mobility, in small electric vehicles. We're putting marine applications, yes. So we're putting batteries in a lot of very, very interesting and exciting stuff. And I forget if I told you this last time we talked, Tim, but I was in a hotel in Munich towards the end of last year. And it was late at night. I'd been in meetings all day, and I was tired and hungry. So I did something I rarely do, which is I ordered dinner at the hotel bar. And yes, a robot brought my dinner to me, and I looked at that thing, and I was like, "Eureka! Eureka! There's going to be an explosion in the proliferation of devices that do all sorts of stuff for us. And the one thing they're all going to have in common is they're all going to have little battery packs in them. They're going to need to be safe and energy dense, and that's what we make. So I think we are just at the very, very tip of that iceberg as well, with a great deal of promise there. But anyway, so from a drone point of view, we are already putting energy storage into drones, which is great because that means we know the drone companies. And yes, we also have patented a product called UAV-ARC, Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Autonomous Renewable Charger. So just like EV-ARC, Electric Vehicle Autonomous Renewable Charger, Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Autonomous Renewable Charger. So the two areas where I think that's going to be most interesting. This is a thing that can be deployed on top of a flat roof, on top of a hillside. It can be deployed. I have a marinized version to go out to sea for submarine launched, for example, drones. This is a product that we believe we will monetize probably first with the military, because situational awareness is absolutely huge. Everybody now, it's amazing. I've been talking about this for years, but now everybody's seeing on 6 o'clock news. What do the Ukrainians do when they want to know what the Russians are up to? Right? They fly a damn drone over top of them. Right? Now the drone has to come back to them. And that's one of the weaknesses, limited range and all that other sort of stuff. Our product, hardened for a forward operating environment, deployed, that drone will be able to stay out, touch down, refuel, get back up in there and keep working. Does not need to come back to the operator, which is very valuable for a whole lot of different reasons. So that UAV-ARC product, under those circumstances, military ramifications are very, very significant. But you mentioned package delivery, and I happen to believe, as I always go back to the mighty US consumer, there's the irresistible force. And I think mighty US consumer is going to get very used to same-day delivery. A great deal of that's going to happen by drones. We have an ability to keep those drones up in the air almost indefinitely. And when I say up in the air, I mean they don't need to home run to their bases, because they'll be able to refuel on our UAV-ARC. And then there's another tricky little thing that the UAV-ARC will do. And that is it will gather data about that unmanned aerial vehicle. So when that UAV lands, 6-rotor drone lands, if one rotor is warmer than the other 5, we're capturing that. We're making that information available to package delivery company of your choice, or the military, or whoever else. And the data may end up being more valuable than the fuel. Because state of health will be absolutely huge. The thing that will absolutely destroy the drone business is if a few of them drop out of the sky and knock some little kid on the head.
Yeah,
or something
kill
like
somebody,
that.
right?
Yeah, exactly. You just can't have it. And so our ability to gather state of health information about the thing externally, not relying on its own sensor knowledge, we're looking at it. We're saying, hey, you're hot, you're cold, something's damaged, or whatever else like that. I think that could end up being worth more than all the fuel that we give them. And remember, the thing about the fuel that we give them, we have no unit cost for the energy. We don't pay a utility bill. We're getting it all from nature, or the good Lord, or whatever you believe in.
Driving on sunshine, baby.
Yeah, in this case, it'll be delivering on sunshine, or spotting on sunshine, or hovering on sunshine. I don't know. Yeah, it's a lovely business. So then you say, well, if it's so great, why haven't you done it? Because I just explained to you, I've got all my engineering resources on what we're revenuing right now. Then they will go to the EV standard, and then as soon as they're done with that, they'll get onto UAV-ARC. And then one other thing that you should know is we're not stopping there. I appreciate you talking about the fact that we're not a one-trick pony. Not at all. Anywhere clean energy and transportation intersects, you're going to see me aggressively looking for opportunities to be profitable. Because I think this is one of the biggest paradigm shifts that humanity will have ever seen, frankly, moving to this all electrify. Everything runs on electricity, right? In the future, and that's going to be a gigantic infrastructure paradigm shift. There's going to be lots of new business models, lots of other opportunities out there, and I'm going to be looking. And I will do my usual thing. I'll pick and choose, and when I see something I like, I'll work very hard to get it right, just like we did with the battery company.
One thing you have been, Desmond, from the very beginning is very consistent. Yeah,
yes.
I mean, you've been a very consistent guy. You're not one of those guys that wavers with whatever the new trend is or whatever. I mean, you've been solid the entire time. Your timing may not have been perfect, but then who the hell's timing is perfect ever, right? Everything always takes longer than you think it's going to take. That's just the way it is. I don't care how obvious the story is. For some reason, it never goes as quickly as you think it's going to go. It just doesn't work that way.
I think you know, we're two things to say on that. First of all, I'm just not clever enough to come up with a new story every 5 minutes. I like latching on to something, and then I'm a grinder. I'm an operations guy. I'm not a transactionally focused person. I'm an operator. I'm a grinder. I will grind. It drives my wife and kids crazy because I do everything the same way in life, right? Grind, keep going, head down, rugby, just run into them, keep running into them until we wear them out, right? That's kind of the way I operate. But the other thing is on timing. I think we are doing some very innovative stuff. We're doing things that countless times I've been told impossible. That'll never work. You can't do that. It's like waving a red flag to a bull, where I'm concerned. And I think generally people who do stuff like that tend to be impatient, even unreasonable. Right. In fact, there's a saying that goes, and I'll paraphrase, I'm going to butcher this, I'm afraid, but it goes something along these lines, that reasonable men comply to the world around them, while unreasonable men expect the world to comply to their wishes. Therefore, all progress is made by unreasonable men and women, right? Because you have to be unreasonable to want to see things change. And so, but the other thing that goes along with that is impatience. I'm a deeply impatient person. I have an expectation that everything moves quickly. I want everything to move at the speed I move all the time, and it doesn't. Okay, right. So yes, one of my great failings, one of many of them, is that I tend to be a little early to the party sometimes because I just can't believe that everybody doesn't get on board as quickly. However, I'm rarely wrong, it has to be said, about this. Early, yes, but not wrong. And I'm not wrong about electric vehicles. I will not be wrong about the LAMP standard or about the drones either. It's just a matter of when. And the good news now is we don't need to spend 10 years waiting for EVs like we did. We have EVs now. We're building a lot of product. We're growing like crazy. We will be able to evolve these other products into the markets and all the other things that we're going to do in the future with this solid underpinning, solid foundation of the infrastructure that we're building for EVs. Because I can tell you this. Somebody said to me the other day, "Oh, you've done it. You've really done it now, and you're at the point now where you've got so much backlog. You could potentially cash flow on the contracted backlog that you have. You're in a great shape where that's concerned." And you know what I said to him? I looked at him and I said, "I'll tell you what I am. I'm a guy who's been crawling around in the dirt for the last 10 years because I believed in something. I just put one foot on the first rung of a ladder, and I'm looking up." And I can't see the top of it. It just goes on and on and on, up and up and up. And that's how we are where growth is concerned. Yes, we have an awful lot of backlog. Yes, we're growing like crazy, but I can't even begin to see the end of it.
And that's a pretty comfortable place to be.
Could be worse. Could be worse. I was in Chicago last week at our battery factory, and we did an all hands on deck meeting. And the team, it's been a bit of a crazy thing because do you know what? They are now producing 10 times as many kilowatt hours of batteries as they were the month before we acquired them. Think about if you're an employee of a company, right? And you've been moving along at a pace, right? And then you get acquired, and in less than a year, you're doing 10 times the production that you were doing when you were acquired, right? And I showed them this chart. And I said to them, listen, first of all, round of applause for everybody. You've done magnificently, and you should be very proud of yourself. And I said, now look, I know it's been difficult. I know it's been very trying. I know you've had to work overtime and Saturdays, and I know you've had to do all these other things like this. And I said, but I just want to ask you all to look at this chart, and I want you to ask yourself one question. Imagine if it was the other way around. Right. Imagine if you were looking at all that growth at the beginning, and it just disappeared, and it was going down, down, down. How would you feel when you go home tonight? Okay, so the fact is, it's hard work. It's a crazy time. We're growing like crazy, and people are being stretched. but we're moving in a fantastic direction.
So one of the things you said, efficiencies, you really focus on efficiencies. You just came out with a new trailer for your deliveries, right?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it may seem like a little thing, and probably didn't get a whole lot of, but it's how important is it?
Look, a little over a year ago, it took 2 human beings to deliver an EV ARC, to deploy an EV ARC. About a year ago, it took 1 human being to deploy an EV ARC. We can now deploy 2 EV ARCs with 1 human being. That's what it means. Okay, and so what does that mean? Well, it means double your capacity, half your cost, and we're not done. But so there's a couple other funny things I've got to tell you, because it's just so weird how some people get, and I know you will. Some people get this, and some people, they're just like, they look at me like with a blank expression on their face. So one of the things I did recently is I had my driveway widened in my property here. I had my driveway widened. Why would anybody widen their driveway, right? Well, remember, I've got 18-wheelers coming in and out of here, right? When we're over, look up the Berlin airlift. I'm a student of history, okay? When this is over, look up the Berlin airlift, right? The Allies had to fly food into Berlin because the Russians surrounded it and wouldn't allow any food to get into Berlin after the Second World War. So they had this thing called the Berlin airlift. And basically, they were landing an airplane every minute to get enough food because the people in Berlin were starving to death. And they were landing an airplane every minute, okay? If you didn't make your first pass, you had to fly back to Britain, right? That was how it was. And what I told my team here is when the trucks come in, they come in right, they go to the place we've marked where they load or unload, depending on what they're doing, and then they get the hell out of here. And I want you to tell them if they don't park in the right spot, the minute they get in here, turn them around. Send them out and make them come back in again. So I widened my driveway, and people are like, Desmond, why are you widening your driveway? I'll tell you why, because I have a corner office, and I look and I can see the 18-wheelers trying to get in and out of the property. And I can see, first of all, they have to slow down to do it. And secondly, they always pick up a rear set on the trailer on the curb, okay? And that slows everything down and it bounces our product around and everything like that. So I'm like, get the contractor in here, widen the driveway. So if you are like looking for clues about a business and you see a guy who's in the kind of business that I'm in, investing in widening his driveway, 2 things. He's a nutter, maybe, but I don't think that's the only thing going on here. Or it's because he needs to get a lot more trucks on and off his property faster. And if that's the case,
efficiency. I mean, minutes add
everything, everything. So it's just like that, those sorts of things, as I say, like I knew you would get it, but a lot of people like, it just doesn't compute with them. It does to me. Don't forget, I'm an investor too. And I'm a guy that does M&A, right? And so I'm looking at this, and if I come to a place like this and I see they just widened their driveway, right? Okay, I know you can't tell me what's coming, but you just widened your driveway, right? Right, something's happening here. I want to know what it is.
All right, so I got a lot of heat. I mean, look, anybody that doesn't fully know the story, the entire story, I mean, Desmond has written an article about, the grid being hacked. And it's one of the things that I had thought about and felt as though that this is a homeland security play. And if you read Desmond's article, it's frightening to read, but true. And if they're not all your facts, they're facts that you looked up, right? I mean, there's a lot going on here when you look at this company, and Desmond's had a long head start. Yeah, he's been early, but that's good. I view that as a good thing, because that's how you become more efficient with the 2 with 1 delivery, right? Yep. I mean, those little things, each one of those adds up. I mean, those add up. The one thing that I think we do really good interviews. I think we do very comprehensive interviews. I think we talk about a lot of things. The one thing I got I disappointed people on was I didn't ask you about when do you get to profitability? Yep,
good. I'm delighted to talk about that. So I'm going to give you some helpful guides here. First of all, we're a manufacturing business, right? In general, the more manufacturing businesses produce, the more their costs are controlled, right? And we're no different than anybody else. That's something you should know about us. So let me give you some hard data points here. We have just moved through a period of extraordinary inflation. In fact, we've seen more than 27% increase to our costs, more than 27% increase to our costs, essentially since the beginning of COVID, but mostly in the last year. Okay. Now, during the same period, with a 27% increase to our costs, during the same period, we have improved our gross profitability by 11%. Well, I shouldn't have to explain this, but if our costs are going up and we've improved our gross profitability and we have not raised our prices, and we haven't, then what that tells you is that the 11% improvement in gross profitability has to be combined with a 27% increase in our costs to show you what actual impact we've had, right, over our overall cost infrastructure, because we've absorbed all of the 27% increase in cost and at the same time still continue to improve our gross profitability by 11%. So then you say, okay, well, what does that mean? I can tell you this. Well, first of all, unit economics. Every time we sell an EV ARC, get paid by a customer for an EV ARC, which is every time, we have no bad debt, we are better off than before we did that. So what that tells you is that the unit economics are good. I'm not a company who actually loses money every time I sell a product. And there are some out there, right? And frankly, some good companies. They're just, that's the process they're going to go through to evolve. I think Tesla was 13 years before they turned a profit, right? So it's not, look at Amazon's time before they turned a profit, right?
No, it's not.
Okay, so it doesn't mean you're a bad company. It just means you have a plan. It doesn't always work out. People are sticking to it, but we're not like that. We're not worse off every time we sell a product from a cash point of view. Okay, we're better off. Unit economics are good. What hurts us is fixed overhead allocation. So I'm in a factory facility where in 2021, last full year I reported, I built about 124 units, and yet this facility is capable of doing over 4,000. Theoretically 6,300 and some odd a year, but life doesn't operate in theory. In practice, that's why you've got to widen your driveways and stuff like that. You're probably going to do about 4,000 plus a year. Well, I've been carrying the cost of that entire factory, and GAAP requires you to burden the sales that you make with the overhead costs associated with making them. So if I did one EV ARC, it has to cover the entire cost of the factory. If I do 100, it covers 1% of the factory. If I do 1,000, 1/10 of 1% of the factory costs, right? So fixed overhead burdens have been very, very negatively impactful to my gross profit at the same time as inflation has been. And yet I've been improving all of this. Well, why? Because the volumes are increasing. So fixed overhead allocations are coming down. With increased volume comes increased buying power. I buy more stuff. Last year I bought 100 from you. Now I'm going to buy 1,000 from you. You got to give me a better price, right? Well, I can't do that because of inflation. All right. Well, then you're going to hold at least, and then you're going to give me a better price when we move out of this inflationary period. We're much more efficient with labor right now. I've got some magnificent. I track revenue per labor hour, and again, the graphs just like the one I showed to the battery people, right? It's fantastic improvement in revenue per labor hour. The rent doesn't go up. We're currently operating one shift and then a light shift on one side of the building, the steel manufacturing, and then 1.5 shifts on electromechanical. We can go to 3 shifts. We can go to 7 days a week from 5 days a week. All of these things will reduce our costs. But there's something else which is working right now. We have plateaued on the inflationary period. This will just be news for you guys beyond BEEM specific business. I can tell you, cost of transportation coming down, availability of transportation going up, cost of steel plateauing, starting to come down. We've seen reductions already, and not just based on our increased volumes. If you look at iron ore futures coming down, basically the cost of everything that we've seen going up for the last 2 years, plateauing and starting to come down. What we're hearing from all our vendors is that all of these things will get less expensive for us as we move through 2023. Listen, some global catastrophe notwithstanding, right? I'm not going to talk about that. But in general, if things operate the way they're supposed to, we're going to see the cost of everything that we do come down. At the same time, we're increasing our efficiencies and reducing our fixed overhead. So all of that a lot of talk, but it's all action I'm describing. It's words describing actions. It's not just words from me. These are realities that I'm describing. I am telling you that I am targeting 50% gross profit on this product. Why? Well, because I can see my costs coming down. As I told you, unit economics are already good, and I can see my costs coming down. We will drive them down further and further and further. As I tell my entire team here, this is painting the Golden Gate Bridge. Start at the top of the bomb with the most expensive stuff, squeeze some money out of it, go all the way to the bottom, start all over again. You're never finished with this process. You will always be squeezing something out of some vendor or some improved engineering or something. Keep squeezing the costs out of the thing. At the same time, what's happening from a demand point of view where my product is concerned, it's not flattening, it's accelerating and going up very dramatically. Remember, 6, 9, 14.1, 60 in backlog, right? So the demand's going up. So why would I reduce my prices? No, I don't reduce my prices, okay? I hold my price, but my cost comes down. That's how I end up getting to that 50% gross profit. I could walk any lay person through the factory and show them 5 or 6 areas where I can get that get to that 50% gross profit. I have a lot of operating leverage. I am not a top-heavy company. I do not have, I'll just briefly tell you a funny anecdote. I had a banker in here a very large bank in here the other day, which is great. But the bigger banks are paying attention to us. And I told them, you will find no foosball tables here. You will find no fancy coffee machines and no M&M dispensers and no bean bags, even though we are, in fact, a technology company. And they laughed. They laughed like, I'm not that funny. Clearly, they were laughing at something else. And I said, what are you laughing at? And they said, well, we just visited another company that's just like bleeding cash, and they SPAC'd and everything else. We didn't SPAC. We did it the old-fashioned way, where they SPAC'd, and they're just bleeding cash right now. And the place is full of foosball tables and bean bags and M&M dispensers. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm the opposite. Blood, sweat, and tears. That's all I have to offer you. So we're very cost conscious. So we very fantastic leverage, operating leverage, and as I say, good unit economics already, and moving towards a strong gross profit. I'm absolutely convinced of it. Otherwise, I wouldn't do this. By the way, you can clearly see, looking at my history, the way I raise money. Okay, I'm not a guy that doesn't care about revenue and profit.
And that can be said. We talked about this before we jumped on, that people could be looking at your cash and worrying that you're going to have to do a capital raise. But there's a lot of other components in there than just cash that you're looking at, right? Yeah, inventories, there's all kinds of things. Use of cash is different than, and being able to turn it back into cash is a big key component. You didn't just take the cash and burn it, right? Yes. So
there doesn't need to be mystery about this. If anyone's wondering, if anyone who's listening to this is wondering or concerned about me running out of money or starting to buy foosball tables or any of the other things like that, just go back and look at 10 years of filings. Look at how I've raised the money for this company. Incredible discipline with cash, incredible discipline with equity. I threw neither of them around like a drunken sailor on a Saturday night. And by the way, I have been a drunken sailor on a Saturday night. I went to sea when I was a young man. I know what it is. Okay, I'm qualified. I don't do either of those things. People keep telling me you should repeat this because I told somebody this the other day. This is absolute truth. I was brought up in post-war Scotland. Tim, when we came to the end of the toothpaste tube, we were not at the end of the toothpaste tube. You cut the toothpaste tube open and then you smeared your toothbrush around on the inside of the toothpaste tube, or you got clouted around the head. Okay, that is how I am with money today, and I've always been. And that discipline will lend itself very well to the investors, because that discipline with equity and with cash means that we get what we need when we need it, and we give away very little for it.
Desmond, I love talking to you, man. I mean, I do. Listen, I've done that. I don't know if this is the third or fourth interview with you. Very consistent. I think the story is getting extremely exciting now. You do have other things that are in the works. They may not be right here, right now, but I believe in what you're doing makes the most sense, because this is the hot item that's selling, and I think they're going to continue to sell. And if you can get those efficiencies down, I mean, to where you want it to be, you will do things at the right time when they need to be done, right? And right now you're focused, and that's where you should be. I think the story continues to get better. We didn't even talk about potential orders. I mean, you just got from the U.S. Army the biggest order ever, right?
$30 million purchase order.
And I think you got, more things coming. I think you got more things in the works. We didn't really talk about. We did talk about the battery technology company that you've acquired, Allcell, but that's growing too, and they're creating things. I mean, there's a lot of components here that you to take in. And but bottom line is, how many shares are there fully diluted outstanding?
10 million. 10 million outstanding.
10 million.
10 million outstanding. At 1/10 what anybody else has. And I always say, because I'm an old-fashioned guy, as I told you, I'm an operator, not a transaction guy. Comes down to EPS in the end, right? You can have bubbles and you can have this and you can have that, but at the end, everything will come down to EPS. We have one hell of a lot less S into which we will have to divide our E than anybody else does out there.
And not only that, but in case nobody knows, this is should I look at BEEM's chart. Right now we're trading at what, 16 and 1650 or something, right around there.
Far too cheap.
This stock went from, like $6 or whatever, because that's where I got in. I think it was around $6. And it went to 75, I believe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. During the bubble. That was during
what's
the
really
bubble.
Interesting, if any of the tech guys out there, the technical chartist guys, you'll see that the downward trend from 2021 to now is pretty apparent. Anybody could see it was going from the upper left to the lower right. But what's interesting is that right down here, that trend broke. And now you're kind of stair-stepping, is what I call it, stair-stepping higher, right? So you had a nice pop, a nice breakout, and then you've been kind of in this little consolidation phase, and you're almost like a compressed spring. It's being pressed and pressed, and it's coiled up, and it's going to break one way or the other. My belief is that my dog is driving me nuts. Is that it's going to break to the upside. Because why? Because the timing is now here. I mean, yes, you were early, but there is no question in my mind that, EVs are coming, and you have one of the best solutions for a quick deploy charging system.
Yep.
Hands
Scalable.
down. So, have you already captured all the market share? Well, no, because there's going to be 60 million charging stations needed in the next how many years?
Yep.
This is an exciting story. Desmond's a straight shooter. If you've got a question, I'm sure he would be happy to, you don't believe the story, you want to go out to San Diego, check it out. Desmond will be happy to walk you around the facility, I'm sure. This is the question is risk reward. And that's really in everything is a risk reward, right? And she's got a beautiful chart. You just had what's called the golden cross. You got the 50-day that crossed above the 200-day. That is called the golden cross. The reverse of that would be the death cross. So that's a good thing. You're at an area where, look, if you take out 20, I'm going to call it $22, right? Then I think that 2150 area then becomes another floor for you. And I think you just continue to stair step higher. That's my belief. And, if you can get the stock, you don't have to go all in right here. You can just dip your toe. If it goes back down to 1375, I'd be dipping my toe for more and look at that as an opportunity. One thing we can't control is the overall market, right? And right now there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. So 90% of stocks will follow what the overall market is doing. But that's opportunity. That when you know who you've invested in and you know the jockey, this is the no-brainer. You look at it, if you liked it up here, you're going to love it down there. And it's an opportunity for you to buy more. Investing is different from trading, right? There's a decent short interest out there right now. And I think those guys are flirting with fire. I mean, that's my belief. What do you think, Desmond?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do about all of this. I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to make more great products and I'm going to sell them to more great people. And then I'm going to do that again. And I'm just going to keep doing that because I have faith in the US economy and I have faith in the markets, not in the short term. Nothing's more bullshit than the ticker in the short term. Okay. But in the long run, companies that make great products and sell them to great customers and have discipline doing it do well. And that's us. And so you're right, the macro market conditions right now, everyone's looking at the Fed, everyone's looking at inflation, everyone's looking at recession coming. I can tell you recession, I hate to say this, recession will be good for us. It just drives our costs down and we have absolutely no risk at the top line. More labor availability, more transport, more materials, more commodities available to us, and yet more demand for our products. Nothing in our pipeline or in our backlog today is at risk because of a recession. If anything, it helps us. And so what you say to yourself is, what I say to myself as an investor is, I'm just looking for, yes, everything's going to, all boats rise and fall with the tide. So what I want to do is find a few quality plays here. And people will not be surprised to hear me say, I believe we are that, because I spend all day long, every day making sure of it. But when it finally comes down to it, I'm not a trader. I'm not you know more about the charts than I'll ever know, Tim. That's appropriate. What I will do is I will continue to make great products and sell them to great customers, and I will do it again. You will see me also aggressively looking for other opportunities to grow inorganically. I'm doing that right now. We haven't talked about this, but I've just got back from Europe and the Middle East. I did not go there for a suntan. Look, everything's. I'm not saying anything's done. Everything is a process, not an event. But if you look at my history, usually when I tell people we're going to do something, we do it. Sometimes takes longer than I want it to. We've already covered that, but we do it. So I'm not going to stop at all what we're up to. And I think in the end, the chart will reflect that no matter what's happening in the macro markets, and no matter what the technicals say, the chart will reflect the fact that we make great customers.
Eventually, let me put it to you this way. The fundamentals will matter. At
Yes.
some point, the fundamentals will matter. And the story's just starting.
Yes.
In my mind, yeah, you just had the biggest order in your history, but I think you got bigger orders coming.
So do I. So do I. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this.
Right. And
I
I think this is fun. And I think you're on the right side of things. I mean, I just think you're on the right side of things because we need a better system. We need to do better things for the planet and for the consumer.
Yep.
And I think you're on the right side
for our security and for everything else, all the other things that we had.
Yeah.
You mentioned a minute ago that we traded at $75, and we did, and it was during the EV bubble, and lots of companies, good, bad, and indifferent, traded high at that time. Well, here's what I'm going to say to you: I genuinely believe that we will see new highs, and when we do, it will not be bubble driven. It will be driven because
it'll be fundamental.
Continue to execute.
Yeah, Desmond, I completely 100% agree with you. I thank you for coming in and doing the update, because I had people like pounding me to get you back on, and I'm going to do it again probably after the next quarter. We'll try to stay in touch with what's happening over there at BEEM, but keep executing, Desmond. You're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you.
And I think it's a great company. It's a great American story. It really is. It's a great American company story. San Diego.
That's how I feel about it.
And that's what it is, man. It's you got a lot of veterans that work over there at BEEM.
Yep.
I just love the story. So we'll
Thank
have you back soon. And do me a favor, hang out for 1 second, because I want to talk to you about one thing.
Thank you.
All right. So
Hey there, folks. Thanks for tuning in to yet another CEO interview here at Alpha Wolf Trading. Today we had Desmond Wheatley from BEEM Global Inc., ticker symbol BEEM. I hope you enjoyed today's interview, and if you did, do us a favor, give us a like. Why not give us a share? While you're at it, how about giving us a follow? Until next time, stay safe. Alpha Wolf Trading wishes you the very best of success.